Well, hi everybody. Wow. Feels like it's been a while. Not really, because I just did a live stream yesterday. But for this show, it feels like it's been a while. So, welcome back to Pierre the Chef. And I am so happy to be here to do this once again with Christopher. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, and first time doing PR with a new computer setup, and it's just been life has just been the same everything for the last year because everything has basically shut down. I've been joking this is my pandemic beard, which was really funny in May of last year, but it was really long. We were only 2 months in, but now the humor's kind of gone because it feels like we've been in lockdown for like 5 years,
It
even though
does,
it's only
doesn't
been
it?
one. And you
And
see how thick it comes in on the side, so I'll never have a beard like you or Frakes or Ryukar or anything like that.
you
But
will you will never have a beard like Frakes.
no.
Never. So let's just set that aside. I do want to make mention for we also we invited our dear old friend Jess to join us. So Jess, if you're watching, if you decide to jump in, I sent Jess the link to this. So if she decides to pop in during the show, that's absolutely great. But I don't know if she'll show up or not. Um,
Yeah.
but she basically she I think she was a little affronted that I didn't invite her.
That
So
was the impression I got from the Facebook comment. Yeah.
so please Jess, if you want to join us, please jump in. But I'll tell you who isn't here, who really should be here. You know who I'm going to say?
Michael Worley.
No, Michael Worley was not invited either. No, I'm not. That would be difficult to pull off. We'd have to do like
Like Colbert.
Jack Tripper pretending to be his identical cousin Austin, and I'll
Colbert
be
and was a worthy opponent.
yes, where it's like the mirroring of the thing. Yeah, have to like taking the hat off and putting the wig on real quick, and then yeah, it would be difficult to pull off. No. What's his name? Pierre. Where's Pierre?
Pierre told me that he thought the show had been canceled. Now, I tried to at first I started to explain that it's a YouTube thing and there really is no network, so there's no cancellation, and he
No.
wasn't really getting it. So instead, I changed and said that we had to take time to make sure we were meeting all the COVID protocols, and he
Yeah.
was a lot happier with that, and he understood that a lot better. So he apologized. He made other plans. He didn't think that this was happening again. So we will. We've let him know, and hopefully in the future he'll be able to do this because he'll be anticipating that there'll actually be a show, because we can try to get back to perhaps monthly, since we've been sort of defining monthly in a generous manner, that
C Comics, the major publisher that announces
where the monthly
a
title comes out 4 times a year.
announces I just I love it so. Um okay, fine. I guess we'll just have to do it without Pierre.
Yeah. I just got to notice that my internet connection is unstable, so I apologize if I'm not coming through real clearly at the
Yeah,
moment. This is a great omen.
it's always nice when it's always nice when these things happen at the right at the beginning of a show. Um
Yeah.
when these things happen at the right at the beginning of a show. Um
Yeah.
yeah.
Meanwhile, I mean, life is, and I will do that as long as they'll let me. Although I did get back into Wilkes-Barre and you have to have the mask on, and they
Sure.
normally would have a pool of 50 that they're trying to get 12 jurors and two alternates from. And I've been there a couple of times. We go up to a room on like the second floor, and you basically just sit there all day until they decide to select us.
Mhm.
But because of COVID protocols, they can't have that many people in that room that close together. So half are up there, and half of us were sitting in chairs in the rotunda on the first floor,
Oh, nice.
which excitement city. Yeah, and we were there for. So we sat there for like 3 hours, and at 11:30 they said we could go for lunch. We should be back by 1. So I had an hour and a half. So I went into downtown Wilkes-Barre down to Public Square. I haven't been there in like a year. I guess 11 months technically. And there, the place wasn't there anymore. It's a different business.
Oh, that's always
And
nice
I did
to
some research.
discover.
It turns out they went under in June.
Oh shit.
Yeah, which but it was a little pizza place, and you used to have to just go in and put a seating area in, which was great. But when COVID hit, I guess they might not have been doing fantastic before that. But COVID hit, most of the foot traffic stopped, and suddenly half of their rent was going to a dining room they weren't allowed to use. So, that's sort of a, COVID started in March. They just kind of a microcosm of what's gone on with all of this,
Yeah, well, if you haven't been, I mean, if you haven't made it to Wilkes-Barre,
it's been gone for 9 months, and I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't been to town, how are you going to?
Would I? I mean,
yeah. It's Wilkes-Barre, and having been to Wilkes-Barre a couple of times,
hey,
I mean,
cat. Hi.
Oh hey,
this is Cosmo. He is. Say hi. Not even remotely, right? All right. And he's been having vomit issues. So, Corky McBarcelot here. You feed him, and then he immediately throws up. And then he asks for more, because that's what cats do. Sorry, little interruption there.
No, it's fine.
Little cameo from the cat.
It's fine. Having been to Wilkes-Barre is very much like Hagerstown.
Now it just exists on inertia.
Yeah, it's like the second season of Twin Peaks.
Season 2, what the hell?
Let's just keep hanging out with these characters, even though the story's completely over.
Yeah, and then as far as the and as far as the jury duty goes, went back in the afternoon. They called us up. They went through the normal stuff, and then it turns out because I was number 40 out of 50 of stuff, and they gave us that's the row, and they got the pool of jurors out of the first 25. So the second group of us, they didn't select a single one of us, and it turns out somebody that I worked with was the last two jobs, but not the current one, was in the other half of the jury pool and saw me and actually did get selected as a juror. So I got to contact her and ask her how that went. But I managed to get out. I really don't want to be selected because I don't like that level of judgment over other people.
Yeah.
It's because last time I was summoned for jury duty and didn't get picked that time either. The defendant, it was a drug charge, and the defendant was sitting in court, and he was a black man wearing a hoodie. And I'm like, well, way to break stereotype here, Wilkes-Barre. But
oh man,
at least
it's a little on the nose.
I had that thought, because it's because there are a lot of people, and I've dealt with them, I've worked with them. I bet good money that I've attended family gatherings with them who would have seen that defendant and said, guilty. I don't need to hear from the witnesses. I don't even need to know what the charges are. I don't need to know anything. He's a black man in a hoodie. He's guilty. And, with people having that sort of mindset, that's why people, at the risk of sounding self-aggrandizing a bit, that's why people like me and like you should be on juries. Because, in areas that are as often toxically conservative as the areas where we live, having someone like us, that is, how it should work. So, I mean, I'm not going to go out of my way to be on a jury. I'm glad that I'm not, but I'd like to think that if I was, I'd do a better job than a lot of people that I know would.
Yeah, it's like I told you.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with.
Well, it's like I hear a choo-choo train. It's like I told you, when you mentioned it to me in Messenger. It's a shame that you weren't picked because you would have gotten to act out that MacGyver episode that was based on 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, except that most of the jurors are not going to be interested in discussion. They're going to plant themselves, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, but That's the beauty of our system.
Yeah. So anyway, so we survived that, and then I came back and telecommuting and doing work, and one point I'm thinking that because it's been a while since we've done an episode of this. You
Yes,
Let's put this delicately. You've had some upheaval in your life,
a little bit, just a little bit.
and I was like, all right, I'm going to stand back a bit, let things settle out, wait until Steve's ready, and then I'm thinking, you know what? Despite an over reliance on dated inside jokes, I carry the team, so I'm the one who's going to have to ask. So I sent Steve a message in Facebook, and I said, we'd like to do Pierre. I'd like to redo the music episode that didn't work out, or we could discuss fan fiction also as a topic. And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's go. And so we scheduled this. And we never discussed which topic, so I honestly did not know what we would be discussing today until I saw what Steve titled the link on YouTube.
Fanfic.
Yes. I honestly didn't know which one you were going with.
We're talking about fanfic. God damn it. I don't care. Actually, I mean, I haven't. Hope, fingers crossed. The little internet connection problems we were having seem to have cleared up. So but I was going to say, like, it's a good thing we didn't decide to redo the music episode, because who knows if this one's going to turn out to take a shit too. It'll be like the cursed subject every time we try to do the music episode. It's like, nope, you're not doing that.
Yeah, because we did that. We talked for an hour and a half, and the YouTube video was about 40 minutes long and sputtered and intermittent. Only half of it was there, and it was unwatchable.
It was unwatchable because it just jumped all over the place. It was.
You would have 10 seconds of talk, and then it would skip 10 seconds, and you'd have no idea what was going on.
Speaking of unwatchable, I watched the Snyder Cut.
Oh, I'm not
but
watching the Snyder Cut.
You shouldn't. You should. There's no reason for anybody to. I shouldn't have watched it either. But
We did a Twitter stream out of it.
I got it. Yeah, I got it, and I'll probably make a video. Not next week, because I have next week's, or this coming week's. I have that video written already, and I know what that's going to be. But maybe the week after, I'll do a video about, because I had never seen either version. I didn't watch Justice League either. The theatrical cut.
The theatrical cut wasn't great, but it was okay, and it had a couple moments where Superman finally looked like he enjoyed being Superman.
Yeah, well, those aren't in the Snyder Cut, buddy. That great scene. It's not like a great scene, but that decent sort of Superman-esque scene where he shows concerns for the lives of nearby civilians and flies off to save them. Gone. Not in the movie. Not in the Snyder Cut at all.
I kind of chuckled in the theater with the Batman's line poking fun at the previous one where he goes, "Oh yeah, something's bleeding."
Yeah. Oh, that's not in the Snyder Cut either.
Oh, I'm sure.
Nope.
But when you do your video about the Snyder Cut, you need to be like, I have some notes, and then you need to live action slow-mo it.
Yes. Oh my God. But actually that's a good, I wanted to bring up, even though you haven't seen it and shouldn't watch it, and anybody watching the video, if you have not yet watched the Snyder Cut, just don't watch it. It's dog shit. It's absolutely awful. And it's 4 hours, and the last half hour is literally just deleted scenes that they tacked on to the end. Like, that is not, in no way is that an exaggeration. There's like the shot of Superman opening his shirt and showing the costume underneath, and in the Snyder Cut, it's the black costume because Zack Snyder sucks.
Why doesn't he just film in black and white? Why even pretend to do a color film?
I don't know. But yeah, so the Snyder Cut ends. There's the same final shot as in the theatrical cut where he opens up his shirt, the iconic like Superman shot, and then it cuts to black, and that is the real end of the movie. But then it goes on for another 30 minutes, and it's literally just deleted scenes tacked on that have absolutely no context and no meaning, don't need to be there, accomplish nothing other than teasing sequels that aren't going to happen. Like, I mean, imagine watching Avengers Endgame, only it being absolutely terrible, and then there's like a mid-credit scene, but the mid-credit scene is like 3 scenes, and they take half an hour. That's what the end of the Snyder Cut is like. It's awful.
It's almost like
Um,
it sounds like almost at the end they're just phoning it in. Like, it's not a theatrical release, so we don't have to follow the rules of decent movie making. We can just splatter stuff on the end. Take some duct tape and graft it on.
a lot of it, well, the whole movie feels that way. The whole movie feels like Snyder saying, I'm going to put everything back in. I mean, the thing about it is, if the movie had actually, like, if Snyder had actually been able to stay with the project, and the movie, like the theatrical cut, had been Zack Snyder's version instead of Whedon coming in and trying to fix it, um, it would not have been this movie. There's no way Warner Brothers would have released a 4-hour Justice League movie. There's no way Warner Brothers would have released a 3-hour Justice League movie. It would not. This is Snyder just taking everything that he would have been forced to cut out and just throwing it back in, even if it completely kills the movie, which it does. Um, yeah,
So
it's
we're
dog
basically
shit.
saying that it's his version of Justice League fanfic, basically.
Well, that's what I was getting with. I was getting at, because it's a good, even though you haven't seen it, you have seen the theatrical cut, and it's a good sort of entry point into our fanfic discussion, because I think one of the appealing things about fanfic, at least to those of us who write it, which I still do occasionally, and used to a lot back in the day, um,
Yeah,
one of
you were largely one of my introductions to fan fiction. I might not have been the first one, but I think you were the first one who did like a continuing series that I had read or that I had
yeah.
seen.
Yeah, and one of the things that is appealing about it to me, and I think to a lot of people who write it, is it gives you the chance to fix things about sort of official stories or official projects that you don't like, or that you think could have been done better. It's sort of your opportunity in a very small way to kind of put your money where your mouth is, because it's very easy to watch somebody else's movie, even a movie that is absolutely awful, and say I could have done better than that. It's really easy to say that. And with if you write fanfic, you can at least demonstrate, well, maybe your idea, maybe you can never know if your movie would have been better, because you're not going to be able to just make another movie, but you can put it down on paper and at least have a sense of, well, this is the story I would have told, and people can sort of make up their own minds as to whether or not you actually did have a better idea or a more interesting idea than what was actually published or put on screen or whatever. And I, that's kind of what got me into it, because I had written fanfic before, like in middle school and stuff, but what really got me into it, um, like super seriously, was when like the Schumacher Batman movies came out, and they
Yes, I
they were
remember your restrained response to them at the time.
they were yes, they were not to my liking. So I thought I can do something better with these characters, or at least something that is more is of more interest to me. Um, and that's what I did. I think that's what a lot of fanfic authors do. You know.
Yeah, it's there's an aspect of wish fulfillment to it,
Hmm.
and there's also to some extent there's also like if you don't like the way something went, you just write how you would have had it go, and a lot of times it's terrible, but occasionally there's some good stuff there. And a lot of it is just getting into details and nitty gritty that you don't have time to in a theatrical release. Like if you're doing you know a Marvel movie or a Harry Potter movie or something like that, you only have a limited amount of time, and you sort of have to focus on telling your story and getting from point A to point B, and you don't have time to necessarily go into the details or the minor characters or what's going on in their heads as much, and you can really sort of get in there and play around with it and see what was going on that we didn't see, or try to justify things that you did see on screen that are contradictory or don't quite work right. You can look at it and say, well, why would they do this? Well, here's reasons why, and you can write it out. But there's just it's fan fiction is really, in a lot of ways, I would say it's a good way if you're interested in writing. It's
Hmm.
not a bad way to get started because half the work is done for you. You already have a world, you have characters, you have motivations. You can get into writing without having to go through the work of building all of that yourself. And while that's not necessarily the best way to go, because if you're going to go and tell your own full stories, you have to learn to do that eventually. But at least it gives you the ability to focus on one portion of the writing and one portion of it without having to build the entire world at once, which might be a bit more than people are just starting out are capable of doing.
Yeah, it's a great way to practice like
Oh,
certain
I'm hearing the
things.
fire truck coming. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh,
interrupt.
is this
I
the Easter
mentioned before
Bunny?
we
Is the
started.
Easter Bunny coming?
Yes, I mentioned this because they told us that the Easter Bunny will be coming around town on the fire truck. So you'll hear the siren. I might have to close the window here because I can hear the siren in the distance.
Oh boy.
They did something like this. I don't know if it was the Easter Bunny or Santa a couple of years ago, and they had music blasting too, and they were blasting all the hits that the kids they love, like the theme from the Partridge Family.
Oh yeah.
So I wonder how old the people who were choosing the music were.
It's like
So I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, I heard the siren, and I'm like, I got to comment on this because yeah,
yeah. Everybody knows, the fire truck is the preferred mode of transportation for the Easter Bunny. I mean,
right.
like that's just I don't know why I
At least
even
that's the
said
way it works in my Easter Bunny fanfic.
it. I mean, yeah, it's a great way to practice because as you say, like the characters are already created for you. The world is already built. And you can just sort of play in the sandbox. And what I have as a more mature person now than I was when I was writing it when I was a teenager, I appreciate the fact that I can approach writing fanfic in either a way that is trying to be reverent and respectful of the source material, or I can go completely the opposite direction. And both, there are advantages and there are learning experiences to be had if you do either one of those. If you want to write like what I guess we'll call like a piece of straight fanfic that tries to tell a story in a way that would fit in with the official universe, um, that is a skill set that needs to be practiced. You need to be familiar enough with, like, if we're talking, like, I usually write have historically I've usually written Batman fanfic, or at least like DC Comics fanfic. And I need to know, like, if I'm writing it and it's set or meant to be set in like the universe of the comic books, I need to know what Batman is like, what his personality is like. I need to know his supporting cast and how they sort of interact with each other and what their characters are like. I need to know what the tone generally is that I'm trying to hit. And you need to match it. Like, you do your own thing and tell your stories in your voice as a writer, but it needs to match what you are writing fanfic of. And that is a skill. Like, that teaches you to how to adjust and maintain tone. It teaches you how to pace a story, because depending on the style of storytelling that you're emulating, the pacing of the story will be different. It might be much more fast paced. It might have a lot of action scenes, or it might be slower and sort of more character driven. And it depends on what marks you're trying to hit, and it can be great practice for a writer. And
Yeah,
you can
because
also
I've seen
go,
fanfics that go both ways on the pacing thing, where
yeah,
some of them, like, they have you know 100,000 words worth of ideas, and they crunch them down into 15,000 words, and it's this rush, and
yeah,
and then the people go the other route where they write 300,000 words and nothing has happened yet.
yeah. And that's another thing that fanfic, if you are willing to work on this, because I mean the sort of the advantage and the disadvantage of fanfic is you don't have an editor.
Yes,
um you
there
know
there are
yeah,
there can be some huge disadvantages on that. I have
yeah.
decided I refuse to read any story where they misspell summary in the summary,
Good rule. Good rule. Yeah,
especially
I
when they
mean,
say I suck at summaries. It's like, you have this much space to describe your story. Don't waste it saying that you're no good at what you're doing.
yeah.
That's that you're not impressing me at
That's
that.
not, those aren't, that's like, yeah, no, that should be the first thing they teach you in writing class.
Yeah,
Like,
you don't put on your job resume, I interview badly, but I can do the job.
your cover letter should be, I'm going to tell you right up front, I interview very poorly.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're doing when you use your summary to say, I'm bad at summaries, but the story is good.
That's
It's
hilarious. Well,
exactly what you're doing.
like, oh, just, yeah. But I mean, if you are, again, if these are skills that you, if you're trying to be a better writer, that is also a skill that you can practice with fanfic. You know, if you are, you need to learn. Like Allen Ginsberg called it, killing your darlings. Like you need to learn how to edit. You need to learn how. You need to, if you have an idea in your head for this brilliant story, you need to know what to put in the story and what to leave out. You know, and like one of the trends in sort of current present day fandoms, just in general, not just, not just like DC, but Star Trek, everything, is there are certain sort of segments of the fan base that are just obsessively interested in every little minute detail of the world, and people that seem like way more interested in world building than in storytelling. And more power to you. If that's what you like, that's what you like. I don't really get that. Like I mean, to me, world building apart from story is completely pointless. Like I don't give a shit about the
Well,
world if there's not an interesting story happening in it. You know,
well, they do
when
say that one thing that people sometimes do in writing is they create the world and then they put their story in it, but only like 10 or 20% of the world they created in their head makes it to the paper because it's not needed for the story. And you'll
which is
see in
good, yeah,
you'll see in fan fiction where people said, I came up with this goddamn, but I'm putting it in,
yeah,
and you get all sorts of stuff. Like I've read fan fiction of a bunch of different shows that I've watched. Like, and there's one in Stargate where somebody did like a 10,000 word chapter that I bailed on the story. They did a 10,000 word chapter basically going into excessive detail about all the technical components and armaments and equipment on all these different types of ships that they were creating. And it's like,
wow.
I don't need to know this. You
Like
know,
I I'm glad that
it's
you
a,
got this out of your system, but I don't really want to read this.
yeah, I really wasn't glad they got out of their system that I had to deal with it anyway. Yeah, I mean, there's a level of detail beyond which you're not telling your story. You're just, you know, showing off your world, and that's not really, like you said, you've got the focus of your story shouldn't be world building unless you're going to admit that up front. Don't pretend you're writing a story and then just paint a picture of the world that is taking place in and stuff there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you need to, I do think, I mean, if it depends on a writer's process. Like my personally, when I write, I spend almost no time doing any world building outside of the story that I'm writing right now. You know, and to the extent that I do need to create the world in which the story, exists, I do that as I go along. And then I just try to keep track of things so that if I'm doing another story set in the same world, that I don't contradict it too much. Although honestly, I don't really give a shit about that either. Like as long as I'm not like, as long as I don't like kill somebody and then they're just alive again for no reason in a later story, like little tiny inconsistencies don't really bother me that much.
I do remember that happening in a space mutiny.
Yes.
That's not
which
even fanfic.
which is amazing because that is, if you watch that episode of MST3K, right, and they have so much fun because there's this character that was killed off and then she's just there in another scene,
In literally immediately
the next scene.
and it's not even something where she participates. She just happens to be sitting at a console. They pan past her at the
Yeah,
beginning and end. They could have trimmed that.
exactly. Exactly. That's the incredible, that's like the fascinating, hilarious part of that. All they had to do was just cut to the next scene, literally like 2 seconds before. Nothing was happening. No characters were talking. Like the conversation between the main characters in that scene was over. They could have just cut to the next scene. And it's this glaring continuity error that is just there for no reason.
And somebody got paid to be an editor on that.
Yeah.
Got credited
somebody
for it.
Somebody got paid to be an editor on that movie.
But I mean, you'll see mistakes to some extent, even in professional works. Like there was a back when DC first had the Star Trek comics rights, and that was
Yeah,
back when the Next Generation was still on the air,
yeah.
and they did a storyline where the Enterprise got brought into a world where they lost the battle in the best of both worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and in the first part, they talked about characters who had been killed, and they mentioned that Guinan had died in the battle. And then, like 2 or 3 issues later in the same story, somebody references Guinan, and the people in the new world that they come into don't even know who she is. It's like, did you forget that you already mentioned her 2 issues
Yeah.
ago, and nobody caught this?
They forgot.
Yeah,
They
like
forgot.
they killed him off or never existed. Who cares? They're not here.
Whatever. You know,
It's
one
like
of
it's like that's really not that. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal, but it's really careless. And in
yeah.
actual fan fiction, you'll see that a lot, but you expect a little bit better from like professional licensed publications. Although
I mean,
honestly, a lot of the professional licensed publications and stuff that material gets produced is, and I think some of what we're seeing with some of the expanded Star Wars universe movies
mhm.
is just fan fiction writers who have an official license. It's like, I want to do a fan fiction about early Han Solo. Well, let's just do a full movie, and it's not a
Yeah.
story that needs to be told, but it's the sort of thing that would appeal to a fan fiction person trying to fill in the background.
Fill in gaps that don't really need to be filled in. Yeah.
Right.
I
Which
mean,
is
well,
what
yeah,
happens with all that's sort of the story of every prequel, though.
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the the Solo movie is a really good example. Because I thought Rogue One was actually a really good movie, and it sort of was a good enough movie in its own right to justify being a
Its
prequel
existence.
and telling a story that doesn't really need to be told. Like we didn't need to see that story. Like Star Wars makes perfect sense without it. We don't need to know how they got the Death Star plans. Um, and that's not really a story that to me was crying out to be told. Like I've never once watched Star Wars and thought, I wonder what the story is behind how they got those
Yeah.
plans. Like,
When
who
they said some
cares?
of our best agents died to get this information, we said, I want to know about these agents.
Yeah, but
I just have
they
to wait 35 years.
but they made a movie about it, and it turned out to be a pretty good movie. So it justifies its existence because it's good. The Han Solo movie, I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it's just kind of there. And you're like, do I need? And I knew they were going to do the fucking Kessel Run in 12 parsecs thing. I never gave the tiniest scrap of a shit about that. That was something that like Star Wars nerds have talked about for 40 years. Well, a parsec is a measure of distance, not a measure of time. So what if instead of, a speed race, it was like a navigation? Who fucking cares? You fucking nerds. Who cares? But of course, they have to explain that in the movie, and they even have the origin of his name. That can't just be his name. It has to be that he's going somewhere by himself, and like the registrar is like, oh, Han Solo. Oh, good, because I was wondering why that was his name. I mean, like in a world where there's guys named Obi-Wan Kenobi, do we really need to explain why there's a
For
dude named
goodness
Han
so.
Solo? Yeah, but so there were definitely like parts
People,
of it that were very
people,
fanficky.
yeah, people who end up answering questions that most people weren't even asking.
Yeah, yeah, and that don't like I say, that don't to me that don't really bear elaboration.
And those are
Like,
like almost those are like fanfic moments in the actual official
and yeah,
material.
yeah, yeah. Well, and some of that is also the result. I
I
mean,
mean,
there are yeah.
you've described Star Trek Nemesis that way as like somebody's bad
Oh,
Star Trek fanfic.
Star Trek Nemesis really plays to me like Star Trek fanfic. Yeah, totally.
Like,
Um,
let's marry this character off. Let's promote this character. Let's just do all these things.
Yeah, yeah, because there are a lot of really easy, obvious choices that feel like fan service, like
And they take
Troy and
all of them.
Riker. Yeah, like Troy and Riker getting married, which has turned out okay because their episode of the Picard series was, I thought, was the best episode of that first season, and it's Riker and Troy having a family and living together on this planet. And it was a wonderful episode, and it was really nice to see them, and it worked really well. But in Nemesis, it feels like we give up. We'll just marry them. They'll get married. Screw it. It's the last movie. We give up. You know, and you know, they do like the twin Data story again. Like we've seen that before, and they're like, we'll just do another one of those.
And so they can kill him off, but still have a loophole if they want to take it later.
And then and then in Picard, he just ends up in a drawer. It's like, nope, forget that. We're not doing that either. You know, and you know, and Nemesis, like Picard, I still think Picard is written way out of character compared to, you know, even the other movies. People complain that Picard feels out of character in the movies compared to the TV show.
He went from a cerebral TV show character to an action movie character. They tried to do action movies with the Star Trek: The Next Generation cast, which is not really what the Next Generation cast was designed for.
Yeah, but and he feels really out of character, like
the wedding toast, laughing as he's racing across the planet in a dune buggy. He's, you know, having to go in and do the fighting himself. No, it has to be me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Why?
Yeah, exactly. And you know,
and then he goes in with his phaser rifle and he breaks it using it as a club. It's like, you're not a Jem'Hadar.
Yeah, it feels very fanficish. It feels undisciplined, is I think in the writing of it. It feels like there was nobody to come in, and John Logan, who was the writer of that, who is like a huge Star Trek nerd, and I think it's a good example of how sometimes the people who are the closest to the material are not necessarily the best choice to write it. You know, because John Logan was obviously, he's a big Star Trek fan, and it was like one of his dream jobs to write a Star Trek movie. And
what a job he did with it, huh?
And I think he was just kind of self-indulgent with it. And there wasn't like a hard ass who didn't give a shit about Star Trek, who just wanted it to be a good movie that made sense, to stand over his shoulder and say, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. You know, which I think is
what was there when he just wanted to cash the check.
Yeah, which I think is what that movie really needed. Like, you know, that's why I think the best director of Star Trek movies ever is Nicholas Meyer, because Nicholas Meyer understands Star Trek and understands.
The window here.
Okay, I can hear it.
Yeah, you'll probably still be able to hear it, but at least the window's closed. Sorry.
Hi, Easter Bunny. But no, like Nicholas Meyer understands how to tell Star Trek stories and understands the appeal of it, and just understands storytelling and movie making in general, but he's not precious about it. Like in his heart of hearts, I don't think he really gives a shit about Star Trek. He's like a Sherlock Holmes nerd. He obviously likes Star Trek, or he wouldn't have done it as much as he did, but he's not like a huge Star Trek nerd. He's not precious about it. And that allows him.
He's willing to do things and make changes that somebody who's a fan wouldn't. He wouldn't make the obvious choice that the fans have all expected. He'd make the choice that's best for the story, even if it's something that's, you know, killing off a character or breaking something that nobody who has been a fan of the show would ever expect to be broken, or, you know, anything like that. You know, just somebody who's willing to take chances that a fan wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. And someone like, well, as you said a second, someone who's willing to put the story first and say, this is the story we've chosen to tell. What does this story need? You know,
didn't I say something to that effect a long time ago? If you're dealing with a franchise property, what you have to do is respect the characters and ignore the fans.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you hear that, Star Wars? Because a more recent example, because I think Star Trek Nemesis is a good example. A more recent example of a major franchise movie that feels like fanfic is The Rise of Skywalker, which I liked a lot more than most people seem to have liked. I did not think that was a horrible movie, but
no, it wasn't. But I think my favorite parts were the parts that other people hated. Like, I really liked the way they were able to pass things off through the Force, you know, like behind the back.
I thought that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I thought that was a really cool effect.
I thought that was something that could have looked really hokey, but was actually presented very, very well. But you have all the nerds saying, well, the Force can't do that. It's like, yeah, well, where's the guidebook on what the Force can and can't do?
Yeah.
It's space magic.
It's made up. It's a made up movie. Like, I feel like people need to be reminded of that I love, because, like, you know, when I defend the look and the aesthetic of Star Trek Discovery. When people, and people will say like, but the 23rd century doesn't look like that.
Yeah. I didn't watch your video on why people hate the new Star Trek because I was afraid there might be season 3 Discovery spoilers in it, and I haven't seen that yet.
I don't think there are. There might be. I don't think there are.
I
But
wanted to
anyway,
catch
but
up
okay,
before I watched.
but but yeah, I mean, there are people who, especially when Discovery first debuted, and you saw that it didn't, it's set in roughly the same time frame as Star Trek the original series, but of course the aesthetic of it is completely different.
Just because movie making technology has advanced a bit in the last 50 years.
Exactly,
people don't grasp that.
Exactly, and there were fans that rejected it sort of out of hand because it looked different, and their excuse was, well, that's not how it's supposed to look, and I'm like, it's made up. Like, it's not, and people have argued with me about it and said, like,
what?
well,
these people need to go and write their own fan fiction where they describe that the bridge looks exactly like the Enterprise did in The Cage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's
and spitting information out on paper on a teletype.
I mean, yes, right. They had printouts, for Christ's sake, which is fine. And here's the thing: I like that aesthetic. I mean, I like the aesthetic of Star Trek the original series. And if somebody for some reason decided that they wanted to do like a new show set in that same time frame and make it look exactly like it looked in the 60s, go for it. That'd be terrific. But you don't have to.
I will say the original Enterprise bridge in the season 2 of Discovery looked fantastic.
It looked so good.
And with the advances in technology, everything. See, when the original show aired, all your light had to come from behind camera. You couldn't really have any light sources on camera because you'd throw off the white balance. It would wash out. The technology wasn't there. Now everything is lit up. The walls are lit up. The ceilings are lit up. The floors are lit up. The red rails around the Enterprise bridge are lit up. Yeah. Everything has lights in it, and you can get away with that now because the technology is advanced. When you watch video, I mean, that's sort of the same thing as watching video footage of concerts where you look at it now and it looks perfect, but you watch something that was filmed even like 20 years ago and everything is washed out and dark and you can barely make people out sometimes because there's not enough light. The technology advances and, the show advances with it. But getting back on the strictly to the whole fan fiction thing, one of the other appeals, I think, of fan fiction is the ability to do crossovers that would never in a million years happen in real life.
Oh yeah, well, like that one that I never actually read the whole thing, but you showed it to me years and years ago, where it's like a crossover of basically everything.
Yeah, there are two big crossovers that I really thought were done fantastically well, and they're they're products of their age because you generally don't see crossovers between shows that aired 20 years apart. It's whatever's popular right now gets mixed together. So this one person had done they said that it was originally going to be a round robin where you could drag in any property you wanted as long as you have a good reason, but then she decided to just write it herself. It's called Crossover the Witness, and I'm not sure where you can find it online now. I'd have to search a bit if I were really looking for it. But do you remember there was a Starman movie with Robert Hayes, who's most famous from Airplane?
Yeah, well, a Starman TV series, yeah.
There's a Starman TV series. It crosses over the Starman TV series and Forever Night, about the detective who's a vampire.
Yeah.
And Highlander. And Quantum Leap.
Of course.
Sam leaps into Nick Knight's partner.
Oh, perfect.
And the X-Files. Mulder and Scully are there too. And there's references to MacGyver, although MacGyver himself does not show up.
That's amazing.
And what's incredible is it actually works.
Well, those are all somewhat similar properties, I mean, I like Forever Night in the X-Files makes perfect sense. Like you can kind of see that.
Dropping Sam into the middle of it so that Nick Knight's partner doesn't have to have any idea what's going on with all of this is really a good way to get around that. And it is so well done, and it's if you can find it, because that was back when fan fiction wasn't on websites, it was on news groups, and you had to hope somebody archived it and caught all the chapters. The other one that I would strongly recommend, and this one is on fanfiction.net and possibly other places, is called Brown Coat Green Eyes, and it crosses over, of all things, Firefly and Harry Potter. And it does it in a way, because that sounds ridiculous. I'm sorry, that sounds ridiculous. it does it in a way that it not just works, it almost seems obvious. In fact, there's when years and years ago, Kristen watched Firefly with Scotty,
Mm-hmm.
and she was waiting for this one thing to come up, waiting for it, and went through the entire series, and it never happened. And she was asking, she said, "I thought there was a scene with where they went to visit Jane, and there's a scene with all the squirrels." I'm like, that was from the fan fiction. That was so good that she actually placed it into the TV series. It's actually it fits everything together that well. It sounds
Yeah.
absurd, but it really, really works, and I can recommend that one.
Yeah.
Plus, he's got a crazy sense of humor, which really helps.
Oh yeah, though, and that was sort of
It
the
helps. It helps to not take things like that especially seriously, because certain combos are completely absurd, and you sort of have to acknowledge that to an extent to make it work. You can't be Zack Snyder serious about it
oh no.
and have some of these things work. And although, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. I mean, what could be more chilling than the phrase "Voldemort knows about the Stargate program"? You know?
Oh, that's cracking dialogue there, buddy.
Yeah,
Um,
but
yeah.
but but crossover fix that really has, that's something that you will never see done professionally, because you just couldn't work out all the legal rights to everything. I mean,
Yeah.
as it is, Marvel has struggled to keep all of their characters under one roof, much less bring in outside properties.
That is something that, because it's unsanctioned and unofficial, um, you can do things with the characters that just, because they're under different corporate roofs, like you probably couldn't do, like, and just little things like most of it is still unwritten and probably will remain so for a while, but Dana and I are write fanfic together and and we're sort of, you know talking about ideas for like just like a fanfic universe where it's all under one umbrella, and it's DC stuff. It's like Superman, Batman, Justice League, Teen Titans stuff. And one of the ideas that she had was that Clark Kent is a Disney nerd, and it's just a little character thing that just couldn't happen in the official stories because they're corporate rivals. Like you wouldn't be able to get away with having Clark Kent be a massive Disney nerd. Somebody would come in and say, "Can we make this like he's really into Looney Tunes or something?" You know, and that
Yeah.
would be fine, and that'd be cool too. It'd be like that would be a nice character beat. And maybe instead of his dream is, instead of wanting to go to Disneyland, he wants to go to Six Flags. It's not, I mean, it's not quite the same thing, but in a in an
It's something
actual.
that it doesn't drive the plot. It's not a deal breaker in any direction, but it adds depth to a character.
Yeah, and it tells you something about him. And if
Depth
and
to characters. Zack Snyder, take notes.
yeah, I know. Oh, and also
Characters can care about things besides
yeah.
themselves.
And also Zack Snyder and people who are defending him also take note. Exposition is not characterization. Uh, just telling us, just telling us things about characters is not characterization. Because like that's another thing about the Snyder Cut. People, one of the big defenses of it is, oh, it does a lot more. It does right by Cyborg. I mean, if by that you mean Cyborg gets a lot more screen time, yeah, absolutely. Cyborg gets a lot more screen time in the Snyder Cut, but almost all of it is exposition. It's Cyborg like playing, but he's like narrating flashbacks and narrating like montages and stuff. And I'm like, no wonder they cut this shit out. I mean, sorry. I mean, I think Cyborg they should have done a better job with Cyborg too, but this ain't it.
I
Like,
honestly, I got to admit, I don't understand why DC took Cyborg and put him in place of Martian Manhunter in the Justice League to begin with. Is this one of the things they changed just for the sake of changing things back when they did the New 52, which is basically when I bailed on DC Comics because I couldn't afford it to keep up with all the comics, and I was like, God, they're rebooting again. Like everything that I've been following is just wiped clean. If they don't care about it, why should I?
And that was like 2 reboots ago. Like that. I was like, I can't believe they're still doing this. They're still resetting their timeline again. Who gives a shit about any of this?
Well, they went 50 years and then they went 25. I figure they're going to go about 12 and then 6 and then 3, and eventually it'll be like every week.
Eventually, like every story will be a reboot, and it'll be like there'll be just an endless series of number zeros for all of their comics from now on.
Like the character by the end of the issue is not the same character he was at the beginning of the issue.
It's like, God, I mean, I feel like it's kind of like a snake eating its own tail in a way. I mean, it's
That's something they need to take. The professionals need to take a lesson from the fan fiction writers. Just tell your stories and don't worry about it.
just exactly. And I mean, part of it is it's driven by a desire to to make things accessible to the fans and to the readers. But and there are readers and there are fans that are genuinely preoccupied with stuff like that. But part of it, I think, is that they have been conditioned to care about stuff like that because it's obvious that the people who publish the comics are so preoccupied with it. Like, if DC Comics just allowed writers and artists to tell stories and they didn't give a shit about the long-term continuity and whether or not a story published today contradicts something that was published 50 years ago, like most fans would not care about. There would still be, because everybody's different and there are people who get stuck on details, and that's just the way they read stuff, and that's fine. But most people care about the story they're reading now. And if it's a good story, if the story that I have in my hands right now is a good story that engages me emotionally, that makes me care about what happens, I don't give a shit if it has continuity errors or if there's something in it that doesn't quite fit, what happened a couple years ago or in some other book that somebody else wrote, or I don't give a shit.
I mean, even like TV shows, professional top level TV shows,
Yeah.
characters disappear without any explanation. I mean, the kid, they wrote a kid into Married with Children. It didn't work, so the kid just disappeared.
He just vanished.
Richie Cunningham on Happy Days had an older brother who went upstairs and evaporated.
Yeah, and that became that became the name of the trope on TV tropes, going up the stairs.
I think it was in that '70s show. Was it Donna? I think had a sister in an early episode, and then became an only child later.
Yeah.
On MASH, in an early episode, he was writing. Hawkeye was writing letters home, and he had a throwaway line about "Say hi to Mom and Sis for me," and got a sweater from his sister the one time. And then later on, it was established that Hawkeye grew up with just his father, and it was just the two of them. That his mother had died, and that he didn't have, and he was an only child, which flatly contradicts things that were very clearly stated earlier.
Yeah.
And they just didn't care. Let's move forward. This is what this is the story now.
Yeah. It's and if
you don't need to obsess over these details.
Yeah, it's all made up.
If characters can just pop out of existence, you really don't need to worry about this little detail of some story that was written 20 years ago. And there's been 5,000 issues of this character published since then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like I've said before, half joking but also half serious. Like if they ever allowed me to make like a Star Trek show, I would put little things in every now and then that would break continuity on purpose. Just so that someone could ask me about it at a con and I could say it's a fucking TV show.
You should really just relax.
You should, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you listen to the Mystery Science Theater theme song. Just say to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. And that doesn't mean, and you want, because like it's sort of you're walking a fine line, especially if you're doing a show that is like a serious show or a mostly serious show, like a Star Trek show, where there are lighter moments and there are jokes and stuff, but generally speaking, it's a dramatic show. And so you want people to suspend their disbelief, and you want people to invest in the story and invest in the world and in the characters, and you want it to feel real. But at the same time, you don't want to take it. It's a really, really silly show. Like just like superheroes, like Superman, Batman. These are deeply silly characters. When you tell a good
with superheroes is, even if you're not dealing with a solar-powered alien or a person who gets angry and turns into a giant green Lou Ferrigno, you're dealing with somebody. You're dealing with somebody whose way of dealing with the trauma of the death of his parents is to dress up like a rodent and fight crime in the dark.
Like for 20 years, like he's a grown up. I'm sure that the death of your parents was traumatic. I'm not trying to, like, mock your pain at all, but like you're like a 35-year-old man and you're not over this yet? Like you need to talk to somebody, man. You know? Um yeah, but it's and that reminds me, there was talking about how, they're silly characters, and even if you take them seriously and you're telling a serious story and you want people who read or watch whatever you're doing to have an emotional investment in it, you still need to have an acknowledgement that this is all kind of goofy. Like, we get it. This is kind of a goofy thing. There was someone mentioned in one of my Twitter threads about the Snyder Cut, about how, because I was praising Superman and Lois, which we talked about before we went on the air. You said you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but
No, I
um,
wasn't aware that it was available. I might have to
yeah,
catch up on that
S-
after I catch up on Discovery.
yeah,
I haven't seen season 3 of that either. I was waiting for
Superman.
the whole thing to come out, and then
And then,
because
yeah, then you can just watch it, yeah, over a weekend
yeah,
or something. Superman and Lois, Clark in Superman and Lois is a huge dork, and he's great. I mean, he's not like a klutz like Christopher Reeve Superman, but I mean, he's not quite as much of a caricature as he was in Christopher Reeve Superman. But he's like a smiley, sort of jokey dork, and he's
but that's fine.
great.
Play,
Yeah,
you can play the character differently and still be Superman,
yeah, he's
as long as he
great.
still cares about people. Zack Snyder.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing, is he's a great character, and I love him like that. And I tweeted about that and said, I love this version of Clark, And someone replied and said, yeah, but if he was that much of a dork, um, if he was that much of a goofball or whatever, he could never actually get a job at a newspaper. Nobody would take him seriously.
Do you
And
see the people who get hired at places?
well, not only that, but I replied to that. Yeah, you're right. In the show about the alien with laser eyes who can fly and bullets bounce off of him, the most important thing is that you keep it realistic as to how he got his job. Like, what are we talking about here? I mean, he's like, oh yeah, I'm totally fine with the flying and the laser eyes and the bullets bouncing off of him. That's I can suspend my disbelief for that. But how do you get hired for that newspaper? Come on.
There is a thing though that when it comes to writing,
Yeah,
people will believe the impossible but not the improbable. There
that's a
was,
good point.
you can. I think there was actually an issue of Superman where like somebody got, there was a plot line with some killer, and they had some sort of power or whatever, but they had killed somebody in like in a public restroom or something, and the guards, the security detail comes in and finds them and go, oh god, we got to find out, and they go and they decide they have to report this and start searching, and they all rush out of the room without even searching the room they found the body in, where the guy who killed him is hiding in one of the stalls, and people flag that in the comments. They're like, and the people, there was a discussion. It's like, this is a Superman comic. You've got people who can phase through walls. You've got all this
Hmm.
crazy stuff, and that's what you're worried about. And it's like,
Yeah,
but that's not how human beings would react if this happened. The impossible, you just say okay, but the improbable, things that are just wrong, that
yeah.
suddenly becomes a sticking point. Not
There's
defending
yeah,
the concept that the big problem with the show is how Clark got his job. Just saying that there is a line where willful suspension of disbelief will believe much more absurd things and then choke on much more reasonable ones.
well, I mean, I do agree with that, because one of the big problems with, like, for instance, with the way with Zack Snyder's superhero movies are, I mean, one of my major issues with them is that the characters in them don't behave like human beings. They don't have they don't form attachments to things or to each other. They don't seem to care about things. Their actions don't really have consequences other than like big grandiose epic things.
Yeah,
Like
I will never forget when the way that Batman versus Superman pretended to address these issues where they had the congressional hearing and
Yes.
Superman shows up, but he does not have a single word of dialogue in that entire scene,
No.
which ends with a bomb killing a whole bunch of members of Congress and Superman standing there in the flames looking forlorn, like, why does everything bad happen to me? Instead of
Exactly.
actually trying to help anyone.
Exactly.
Which
That's
is the
yeah.
exact opposite of how, the Marvel movies did, like the whole Age of Ultron thing, and then immediately had, all right, there's going to be consequences for this, and they did the whole Sokovia Accord things and put characters on different sides of it. But they were creating a world where, at least to some extent, actions did have consequences for the people who performed them, as
Yeah.
opposed to, it seems like in Zack Snyder, where they're pretending that these are all demigods who are above human concerns, and so the human concerns never enter into it.
Yeah. Well, there's that scene in Captain America: Civil War where Tony is confronted by the mother of someone who was killed as like collateral damage during
Mm-hmm.
an Avengers action,
It's in
and
Sokovia,
yeah,
actually, yeah.
yeah, and I remember sitting in the theater watching that scene, and my initial reaction is like, this feels like it's directed at people who like the DC movies, and saying, and I know it's not, because it's not, these movies take years and years to make, and I'm sure, and it's what it's actually evidence of is that the people who make the Marvel movies actually give a shit about telling stories where actions have consequences, and where we see characters actually have to confront things and grow and change, in ways that feel, even though it's a big, goofy, ridiculous blockbuster superhero movie, emotionally it feels authentic. That feels like an experience that a real person would have. You were
Yeah,
reckless. You did something that you didn't. It got a little bit out of your control. You didn't foresee the consequences. Innocent people were hurt, and now you're being confronted with that. And what do you do?
yeah.
Um,
It feels authentic.
yeah,
In Endgame, there's right before Scott Lang shows up, Natasha and Rogers have a conversation, and it feels like people have known each other for years, and
yeah,
it feels like an authentic conversation. And then, meanwhile, over in Batman versus Superman, when Superman gets killed, and Batman, who has spent the entire movie trying to kill Superman, is like, we let him down. I let him down. It's like,
yeah.
where the hell did you get that from? It's just,
That
there's
whole
not
yeah
a single authentic thing about it. It's just pulled completely out of thin air.
that whole movie, in terms of that sort of thing, is such a mess because I
Zack
mean,
Snyder is a good technical director, but he has no clue what drives the story.
he would be and should be a wonderful cinematographer. If you have ever heard him attempt to talk about the stories he tells, he sounds like a babbling buffoon. He has no idea how to express even like basic, like there's a clip I saw of him on YouTube. It's a clip like from like a director's commentary or something, for Batman v Superman, and he's discussing like, the scene, the Martha scene, the one of the most
Yeah.
ridiculous scenes in a major movie I can remember.
Like, try to pull that's another thing that just came completely out of left field. It's
Yeah,
like, how is this going to be the plot point that,
yeah,
you know,
and he's talking
I want to
about.
kill him, but his mother has the same name as my mother. Let's be
He's
friends.
like, yeah, it's so bad, and he's
I
trying
mean,
to sort of.
to him though, I think that's trying to create a character moment. That's what he sees as a character moment.
Oh, I agree, and I think that it speaks to how shallow his sensibilities are. Like, as I said in a video a couple
Honestly,
weeks.
if Zack Snyder had written all of this as a fan fiction, I wouldn't have read past the halfway through the first story. I'd have abandoned it.
Well, I mean, if
And
he wrote.
I'm sort of doing that now. I'm not watching the movies. The DC movies seem to, there's an inverse relationship between how good they are and Zack Snyder's involvement.
Yes. If the when they do like they basically give Wonder Woman to Patty Jenkins, and she does a pretty good job with it. They let Shazam sort of exist in its own corner over there, and it turns out really good. Back in the main line, it's like, oh no, this isn't good at all. You
I mean,
talked about.
he's bad enough that Ben Affleck went from "this is my dream job" to "I'm going to make this Batman movie that I'm going to star and write and direct" to "I'm probably going to be in the Batman movie" to dear God, get me out of my contract.
I just
That's
don't.
what dealing with Zack Snyder is like.
I don't want to do this anymore. Um, talking about like how like characters behaving in a way that feels wrong is a bigger deal than like the big superhero stuff. One of my favorite examples of that, and I don't, to me, it comes across as funny. Like it's almost it doesn't make me not like the story, but it's definitely an example of like characters behaving the way human beings probably wouldn't behave. In the one of and it's also a crossover. It's one of the comic book crossovers between Star Trek and Green Lantern that
Yeah, which is one of
IDW.
those goofy, you know,
Yeah,
Star Trek, DC was getting a lot of questions. People wanted Star Trek to cross over with the DC mainline universe, and they refused. Then the contract went over to Marvel, and the first thing they did was Star Trek X-Men.
they did a crossover first thing.
Yeah.
Well, this was
And now everyone does it. There's Star Trek Green Lantern, there's Star Trek Flash, there's Star Trek Legion of Superheroes. Yeah.
So Star Trek Green Lantern, for anybody who hasn't read it, is, and they've done two of them, I think, and it's a crossover between Green Lanterns of the DC comic books and the Kelvin timeline version of Star Trek, which was what IDW was focusing on. That was like their main ongoing monthly Star Trek comic, was set in the Kelvin timeline, and it was actually really good. I enjoyed a lot of it. And they did these big crossovers between the Green Lantern Corps and the Kelvin timeline of Star Trek. And the story, the explanation for how the Green Lanterns end up interacting with the crew of the Enterprise is that their universe, the DC universe, all of it is completely destroyed. And they are the only ones who make it out. Like the Guardians, somehow, engineer a way to get to allow some of the lanterns to escape, whatever this thing is that's destroying the universe. And so, and I think it's Hal and Kyle and Guy Gardner maybe, and I think John, and like the big four, from the comics. Like, so like John Stewart and Kyle Rayner and Hal Jordan and Guy Gardner. And so, and they are literally the only four beings to survive their whole universe. Everybody that they know, everybody that they love, everybody who existed where they are from is gone. And it doesn't bother them at all. Like, there's not a scene, there's not a line where any of them is like, oh my God, it just hit me. We're the only ones who survived. Like, they get over it so fast. And they go straight from, oh, our universe is destroyed, to, oh, this place is pretty cool. I mean, like,
our world's gone. That's a thing that happened.
Yeah, there's no reflection at all. And it is hilarious when it hits you. Like, there's not like a beat in the story. Like, I was reading it and it just sort of hit me.
Unintentional hilarity.
Yeah.
When you finally realize it's happening.
You realize, yeah, because I think there's a scene where they're I think they're in their civilian clothes and they're just kind of walking around. Like, I think they're on Earth and they're just kind of walking around a city and they're kind of just, getting to know this place. And they're talking about like, how cool it is. And I'm just like, holy shit. Like their whole universe is gone and they don't care. Like, they're completely over it. And just, I don't know.
That is kind of fanfic-ish.
It is. But also, I mean, you can kind of see why they did it, because if you acknowledge that catastrophic of a trauma, it almost makes it worse, because you either have to make the entire story about that, or then it feels really callous if you acknowledge that it is something that's on their minds, but we're not going to talk about it and we're going to go on and tell our superhero Star Trek story. Like, it's almost better to just be like, forget it. We're not going to talk about it.
That's sort of something I said at the beginning, that fan fiction is good for filling in things like that. If you don't have time in the mainline story to address certain things like this, certain motivations or character beats like that, because you have limited time for a movie, then fan fiction fills in gaps like that. Although, that does seem kind of awkward.
I mean, and really, the best way to handle it would be to concoct an explanation for how those characters are there that doesn't involve the destruction of their entire universe. Oh, they fell through a time portal. Fuck, there you go. Like, it doesn't have to be that. Like,
you don't have to go that over the top. It's like, no, they are never going back.
No, I mean, It's on one side you have DC Comics, on the other side you have Star Trek. Shit happens. Like, it was. I mean, it doesn't need to be that catastrophic, but uh,
Amanda Grayson's however many times grandfather Dick.
exactly. Well, it's like my favorite comic book crossovers aren't the big events like DC versus Marvel or JLA versus Avengers where they acknowledge that they're in separate universes. Like I like the ones where it's like Spider-Man and Superman and they just meet each other.
Yeah.
And for the purpose of that story, they just pretend that they're in the same universe. Superman just is in New York for some reason and he runs into Spider-Man. And that's just, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't waste any time about explaining, like, wait a minute, but does this mean that Marvel Comics and DC Comics coexist in the same? Shh, just read the story. Who cares? Just read
I
the
will say
story.
though, they did when I was in college. I did two different of the DC Marvel crossover things. They did the amalgam comic
Yeah, oh
line.
yeah.
Some of those were just whatever, but there was one with Superboy. They sort of crossed him over with Spider-Man. But they did, I think, in the second one, they did a Legion of Superheroes send up where he kept trying to get back and fix things, and every time he came back, the Legion was similar but different. They were basically poking fun at the continuity nightmare that the Legion of Superheroes is, and that they've rebooted that more times in the mainline DC universe.
Yeah.
And like he pops up, and you've got 8 characters, and the next time there's 10 members of the Legion, and 6 of them are the same almost, but not quite. And it was just a great send up of the whole thing, which is again one of the best ways to handle a crossover
Yeah.
like that. You sort of acknowledge it's ridiculous and don't try to pretend otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. I write write is probably a generous term. I create photo comics using those Star Trek dolls behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And which is a form, I don't really think of it like this, but it is a form of fanfic.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
I think of it as making comics, but it's fanfic, and it's on the other side of that scale we were talking about back at the beginning. It's completely irreverent and goofy, and the characters are written out of character on purpose
Yeah,
because I think it's
sort of like its precursor, the Justice Friends.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like I mean, the star of the star of those comics usually is Riker, and I write him in a way that Riker would never be written in an actual story, because it's
for good
funny.
reason.
Yeah, because it's funny, and there's the most recent ones that I last week I started it's going to be like a 5 comic story arc, and the inciting incident of that story is the crew of the Enterprise arrives at some alien planet after they've received a mysterious message for Captain Kirk, and Barack Obama is there,
Yeah.
and there's no reason for Barack Obama to be there other than I have an Obama doll and I wanted to do that, right? And there is an explanation for how he got there, but you don't get it until the last story in that story arc, and it's like a line of dialogue,
It's a
and it's
throwaway,
goof
like
and it's silly and it's goofy, and because it doesn't matter. like it's there not every and you can do this, and obviously telling like a comedic story you can get away with that a little bit more because it's all supposed to be goofy and funny anyway. But even if you're telling a straight story, you don't need you know we don't need to know every single thing that happens. You can skip some shit, like
you don't have to put it in 30 minutes of extras at the end.
no, god no. Well, and honestly, even in really in good movies and movies that I really enjoy, and I know we've talked about this before. We've probably talked about this in a live stream before, and I know we've talked about it just talking privately. The first act of the first Superman movie, all the Krypton stuff, that's there because they hired Marlon Brando to play Jor-El, and they needed to justify the massive salary that they paid Marlon Brando and the fact that he got top billing in the movie. None of that needs to be there for story purposes. I mean,
Well,
if
to an extent, although I will say this, the destruction of Krypton in the comics was a throwaway thing. They just
yeah,
explained where Superman came from in 2 pages, and it was gone, and Krypton was gone in Planet 1.
yeah,
That movie may have been the first time that the destruction of Krypton actually came off as a tragedy rather than a plot contrivance.
Yeah, but I guess
I mean, it didn't necessarily need to be there, but since it was there, they did it right.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And there are some nice moments in that, and there are some really nice effects shots, like especially when Krypton is in the process of, disintegrating, and there's like that shot of all the people falling.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really really nice work in that sequence. But yeah, I mean, if somebody handed me that movie during the editing stage and they said, give us a nice lean cut of this, and that's it, and I don't have any other consideration, and make sure Brando gets this much screen time or whatever, if they just said just cut this and make this work in as lean a product as possible, I'm like, oh, this is easy. This first half hour is gone.
Of
It's
course,
just gone.
that also detracts maybe just a touch from the payoff where he's trying to save Lois. He has to choose between his two fathers.
Yeah, but I think you could probably get a little bit of that in, because he does encounter Jor-El in the fortress,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But that's a good point, and that is a major point in that movie. And I will say, the fact that they do sort of tie it in at the end, it feels more. It feels like it's more connected to the rest of the story
As opposed to the
than
Man of Steel Krypton scenes where it's just
yeah,
Russell Crowe and Tugger fighting around
yeah,
Krypton.
yeah. Where
Which,
you could,
oh my,
yeah,
I'm watching this and I'm like, we know how this is going to end. What is
yeah.
all of this?
None of this matters.
He's
None of
finding a
this matters.
gigantic. He's finding a gigantic. Was it a grasshopper or praying at
Yeah,
something?
yeah,
And
something like that.
it was like half an hour of CGI attacking CGI. It's like, and it's going to end with Kellogg gets launched.
Yeah.
Zod survives. Planet goes boom. And then of course Jor-El has to show up later because you can't let a dead character stay dead in a comic property.
Yeah, or you could also use the example of the Star Wars prequels. Like, what none of this needs to be here. No, it doesn't. It doesn't increase our appreciate, or at least it doesn't increase my appreciation of the original trilogy. I don't watch. There's not a single moment of Star Wars, Empire, or Jedi that I watch and I go, "Oh, I'm so glad that I know what I know from the prequels. It makes this so much better." Like, it doesn't. None of it matters at all.
Prequels
Um,
are almost never worth it.
no, no, that
They are usually cash grabs that end up in some way contradicting and devaluing what came earlier in the production schedule.
yeah.
Things that were, or they become contradictory, or it's just, prequels are, there aren't very many prequels. None spring to mind off the top of my head, although I'm sure there's some that have proven their worth and their need to be told as a story.
No, well, because by definition, you're telling a story that you didn't need to tell because you already told the story that it's a prequel to.
Right. I
And
mean, Harlan Ellison, I think, said, he always did his writing on a typewriter, and people would say, well, I like computers because if I'm writing the story and I going through it and I realize I get to page 20 and I realize the story starts there, there's no problem. I can just get rid of the stuff that came before. And Harlan's like, you should know that your story started there and you should have started at page 20.
yeah, yeah. And that's another thing that I think you can practice with fanfic. I mean, that's something that is a skill. I mean, it's a skill that a lot of Hollywood producers and directors and screenwriters need to practice. And you should be entering the story at the latest point possible. If your story doesn't start until half an hour into the movie, you don't need that first half hour. you know I mean, you need, and not, and that, I'm talking in terms of story, not in terms of plot. It doesn't mean that, like, you have to start the story, that your story has to be, as stripped down and lean and bare as possible in terms of plot. You can have character moments, you can have thoughtful beats. I mean, it can be paced however it needs to be paced, but don't put anything in there that doesn't need to be there. Don't just have, like, an opening sequence that has absolutely nothing to do with anything else that happens just because you thought it would be cool. You know, like that was a problem I had with the new Wonder Woman movie. To move off of kicking Zack Snyder in the teeth for a minute.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, the new Wonder Woman movie, which again I didn't think was nearly as bad as a lot of other people did. There are a
Well,
lot
I
of people
actually
who,
enjoyed it, and
yeah,
people said it got kind of ridiculously over the top. But you know what? That's a comic book plot line. Things like that
yeah,
happen in the comics all the time.
yeah. I
It looks
thought
a
it
little.
was,
It plays a little bit different on the big screen or the small screen, as the case may be, with
yeah,
how this was released.
yeah,
But it was a comic book plot line that actually, you know, it was logical within the story itself. It
yeah.
wasn't something that was just absurdity for absurdity's sake.
No, I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was even as good as the first Wonder Woman movie, which I also thought was pretty good. I didn't think it was outstanding, but I thought it was pretty good.
Certainly
I
the
thought it
best that
was.
DC has done.
Oh yeah. Well, on that, yeah, definitely
Although look
better
at
than.
some of its competition.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was nearly as good as the Shazam movie, but I thought it was a hell of a lot better than any of the others that I've seen.
Mhm.
Um, and same thing for Wonder Woman 84. Like I thought it was fine. But I would have lost the Themyscira scene at the beginning. I mean, it was good in its own right. Like it's a really well done sequence. It's a great action scene, and it's really well. I mean, Patty Jenkins is a really good director. Like she can direct action, and I mean, she's terrific. And it just as a sort of capsule unto itself, it's terrific. It doesn't need to be in the movie. Like I mean, that's like
It's not a strong enough parallel to what happens later to justify it.
no, because we need to see all of this to learn that that's why Diana knows that lying is bad or that cheating is bad. I mean, it's like come on, it's like she learns this basic lesson of morale like oh Diana you won the race but you cheated, cheating is wrong. Oh, now we know how Wonder Woman knows that cheating is wrong. Like I you know it's just it feels like we wanted to have some Themyscira stuff because it's a Wonder Woman movie, and you know it just doesn't. I just like I say, that would have been one of the first if I had been like an executive at Warner Brothers and they submitted that cut, that would be the first note I would say is get rid of that Themyscira stuff because the movie is 2.5 hours long anyway, which is too long. I mean, the one thing that Joss Whedon got right about his version of the Justice League is that fucker is 2 hours long. Period. And I mean Warner Brothers said we want a 2 hour movie and he said you're going to get a 2 hour movie and he took that 4 hour monstrosity that Snyder made and he chopped it down to 2 hours.
Although he
And
didn't go heavy on the slow mo, so like I said, the 4 hour
no,
movie probably would have about 2.5 without the slow mo.
if you could just speed it up. And also you don't know this because you haven't watched the Snyder cut, but in the
No, because
Snyder
I'm a winner.
because you're a winner because you carry the team because you carry the team. Every
Actually,
and the,
you watching that is like taking a bullet for me, so we'll give
thank
you
you.
that.
Well, I should have a Superman shirt on instead of a Batman shirt. Every single
I've got a
time,
Mario shirt on, so I guess I can't talk.
Mario's a tough guy. Come on. Every single
He's died
time,
millions and billions of times, and he just keeps coming back for more.
every
Sorry,
single
dude.
time, every single time Wonder Woman does anything
Oh, I
in the
read that.
Snyder
Yeah,
cut,
you said that.
there is a music cue. Like and it's like a kind of like a choral sort of like voices sort of crying out kind of music cue, like a tribal sort
She's
of
an
thing.
angel, and you will know it every goddamn time you see her.
I swear to God, every single I mean I think in that Twitter thread I said I want to see a scene in a Wonder Woman movie where she's brushing her teeth and when she squeezes out the toothpaste that fucking music cue plays because that it's at that point where it's like anytime she does, even if we just saw her, even if like she just entered a scene and they played that music cue, then like we cut to Batman doing something, cut back to Wonder Woman and she's like standing up with a sword and we hear that music again. It's like God damn it, I get it. I get it, okay? That's her thing. But I know Wonder Woman's in the movie, okay? You don't need to keep announcing her. I think what I said on Twitter is like, imagine if there was a Star Wars movie where every single time you see Luke, they play the Binary Suns theme. Like every single time. It would be ridiculous. I mean, but that's the level of ridiculous. And they don't do that.
Snyder doesn't know how to make a movie. He knows how to direct, but he doesn't know how to tell a story or make a
and
movie.
and they don't do
But
that for any other character. They don't play Batman's theme every single time you see him. Of course, Batman does in the DCEU. Batman doesn't really have a theme. Like
Alfred, be my exposition.
Yeah, he had a theme in in the Dark Knight trilogy, but that doesn't count.
Right.
And it wasn't really a theme; it was more like a bass line. It was sort of like a
Yeah.
rumble, but which was awesome. I thought it was great, but at least he had that. He doesn't really have like a you know. Um, and Wonder Woman has a theme too, not the one that not the one that they play, not the music cue I'm complaining about, like the sort of like her electric guitar kind of like, Wonder Woman theme when she's like kicking ass, right? And you do hear that a couple of times in the Snyder Cut, but you hear that fucking introductory like choral music cue way more, and it's just like, God damn it, somebody needed to stop this, like,
All right, so do we have? We're like an hour and a half in. Do we have
yeah,
anything
yeah.
else you want to say about fan fiction before we touch on anything else?
I think we've pretty much covered it.
I think we spent more time talking about Zack Snyder than
Yeah.
fan fiction, but
Fanfic is better.
Zack Snyder is a fan fiction writer who managed to get a professional gig and never stopped writing fan fiction.
He just kept on doing fanfic. Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, but
I haven't got a whole lot else. I mentioned the crossovers, and mentioned, there are genres of fan fiction that I don't understand why they're popular, but
well, I mean, there are genres of lots of things that I don't understand why they're popular. Part of that is just that I'm old and I'm out of touch with,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, but there seems to be a
like,
large group of people who really love the concept of male pregnancy for some reason, and I don't get it.
interesting. See, I'm not as up on trends in fanfic because I read almost none of it.
Mm,
Like that's one of the things that is, I write fanfic. I read a little bit here and there, depending on if I know the author, or if it's like, or if somebody tells me about it and it's like the concept is something that like sounds like super interesting. But for the most part, I read almost no fanfic. And I mean, there are
mm,
I feel kind of bad sometimes because there's a guy who is a regular viewer of mine who is a fanfic writer and is like incredibly prolific. Like he's working on stuff. He's like, I'm on page 300 of my fanfic, and I'm like, man, fucking you go, right? That's awesome. But he asked me in one of my recent live streams, he was like, would you read a 300 page fanfic? And I'm just like, no. Like, I'm sorry. I'll just be upfront with you about it. There's no
At
way in
least you're
hell I'm ever
honest.
reading that.
Yeah,
Like,
at least you're honest.
you
Yeah.
know, there's no way I'm ever reading that. But but then again, I mean, I make YouTube videos for a living and I watch almost no YouTube except for like clips of stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's
I
very
think
few like,
you used to, didn't you? Because I remember you had the one segment where at the end you would recommend a channel, and you did that for like 100 videos.
yeah, yeah. And those were usually people that I would watch like a couple of videos of theirs just to
Mm-hmm.
get a sense of, okay, they seem decent.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just, I mean, I watch very, I watch very little YouTube, and usually if I'm watching something on YouTube, it's like for research, or it's like something that's, uh, a clip of something else that's not like a YouTube thing. That's like a clip of a movie or an old show or
Mm-hmm.
something. Um, but yeah, like I have no idea what's going on on YouTube outside of like my channel and a few and channels of a few other people that I do make an effort to watch their stuff. But it's like a handful of people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so yeah, I think we've covered fanfic pretty well.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
do you want to do any of the other segments?
Did you? Well, you mentioned wanting to do a 5 minutes of Trump.
It it may be the only time that I'll actually say that it's worth doing, simply because we can do a send off, and it can be the last time that we do 5 minutes of Trump. Hopefully.
Let me open. I should have done this before. Let me open up my app that I need to do the countdown. Um, and
I don't think we're going to need 5 minutes.
oh, probably not. Um, yeah.
Do you find that a lot of should I wait? Should I wait for this until the timer has started?
Let me start the timer.
I'm not going to be able
Okay.
to see the timer, right?
I know, but you won't be able to see it, but it'll be there.
Okay.
Okay. And I also I need to there we go. There he is. Now everybody can see him.
Except me. I win.
Well, not everybody, but yeah. Okay. The
As one of the
timer has
people
started.
participating, I have. Okay. Well, he's gone, and thank God. Speaking as an atheist.
Speaking as an atheist, thank Christ he's gone.
Oh man, the damage will continue forever, but at least he's gone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
have you found that there are still people in the area who have all their Trump banners and flags and shit up?
Yes.
Still?
Yes. I was actually I went out yesterday. I had a sort of a minor adventure yesterday because I dropped my digital audio recorder on my laptop and my laptop wouldn't turn on after that. Uh, so
Oh
so I
jeez.
so I thought I figured well it's not that it kind of froze and I couldn't get it's not that it wouldn't turn on, I couldn't get it to turn off, like I couldn't get it to reset. So I thought, okay, I'll just take the battery out and put the battery back in. But for my model of laptop, you can't just take the battery out, you have to unscrew the entire bottom panel of it, and the screws are like the tiniest screws in the world. And I have like jeweler's screwdriver. I have precision screwdrivers. None of them were small enough. So I had to go like to Lowe's to find the tiniest screwdriver in the world. And on my way there, I there was a house that I was passing, and they had a Trump flag, faded and tattered and beaten by the weather, that for some reason they have decided to leave up. I don't understand why. I don't understand what they're accomplishing other than broadcasting to the world that they're losers and they're assholes. But it's still up. And there's other places. Yeah, there are not nearly as many as there were a few months ago, but
Right.
there are
There are
still,
still some.
yeah, for sure.
4 years ago, it was you lost, get over it. And now it's we're still going to win.
Yeah, just wait. I'm sure there's
There's
some. Yeah.
there's still the one house near where I used to live that has the build the wall in America first
Oh
Trump
my
banner
God.
still up in the front yard. Like they're not
My
even pretending to not be racist about it.
my favorite there were there's a stretch of road that I used to drive on a lot before I moved, and there was like a corridor there where it was just Trump flags on either side, like for like a quarter of a mile. Like everybody in that area were like huge Trump heads, and they had their flag. And there was a flag in my
Except for
favorite.
the burnt out shell of a house that used to have a Biden one in the front.
There's a flag, and it had, Trump 2020, and then the slogan on it was no more bullshit.
I've seen that one.
Have you
I
seen that
don't
one?
know. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean.
Has there been in all of American history, has there been a president more full of shit than Donald Trump? Like,
No.
how could you couldn't make a more ironic flag if you were trying to do it on purpose? Like, yeah, no more bullshit, vote Trump. Okay, what?
And I'll say Biden is not great. He's probably the least impressive of the people who were in the Democratic field.
Mm.
But and I haven't agreed with everything he's doing, but he's at least going in the right direction. He at least cares, and he's trying to do the job and looking out for more than just himself and his cronies, and primarily himself.
Yeah.
You have to see. I don't get people who don't see the difference between Biden and Trump, or who refuse to acknowledge that there's an improvement. Because a lot of the things that the people, it's okay to be critical of Biden, and I can understand that because he's doing some things that I don't agree with, and there's certain things with the border separation. So he's done some good steps. He's done some bad steps. He's done some really bad steps.
Yeah.
But he's still working in the right direction on so many other fronts. And obviously, if you're on that front and you're not getting help, that's a problem. But I'm not going to deny that. But for a lot of the things that people are pushing for, criticizing about, if your goal is something like economic justice or social equity or whatever, or racial equality, those are very nebulous goals. It's not like you're trying to get unemployment to a certain percentage or minimum wage to a certain number.
Right.
You're chasing something. you're chasing the horizon, basically. Here's your goal, but when you get there, you're going to find there's more to do. So you're never actually going to accomplish that goal in the strictest sense. So you need to be happy with the progress that you're making toward it, because that's all you have. You're not ever going to reach a destination. You have to be glad when you're moving in the right direction.
Right.
And refusing to do that is just being dedicated to being miserable.
Exactly.
And I don't get it. There are people who you try to avoid because they're one note and they're boring. You might remember my Facebook post about my angry coworker back when those were up. Or you'll have people who you don't want to talk to because all they'll do is ramble about their World of Warcraft account or their fantasy football team or whatever, and you're like, oh God, here we go again. If you're somebody who people go, oh, here we go with their social justice bullshit again, and they walk away because they don't want to deal with you, are you really helping?
Yeah. Well, and 5 minutes are up, by the way, but technically we're not talking about Trump anymore, so I think we can keep going.
Okay. I'm glad with that because I'm glad to not have to talk about Trump.
Exactly.
Jim Wright said I didn't watch Biden's press conference, and I was okay with that because the transcript will be there, and I know he's not going to spend an hour peddling conspiracy theories or trying to broker war or being a racist asshat.
Yeah.
He's just going to do his job.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, my main complaint about Biden so far is the complaint that I expected I would have about him, which is that he's not doing enough and he's not doing it fast enough. But he is moving in the right direction. And that's not nothing. And
Right.
yeah, I do. I mean, I think we could be doing a much better job in terms of border policy. I don't, you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of things that a lot of people are pointing out, the student debt cancellation that the president has the authority to do just as an executive action. Like he doesn't need congressional action to forgive, tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. And he hasn't done that yet. And has been reluctant. He said he wants to forgive 10,000, but people are saying that he should be forgiving a lot more. And he hasn't forgiven any yet, but he's, it's a struggle with that to get him to do as much as he could do and should do. But yeah, he's not starting Twitter feuds with dictators. He's not alienating our allies in order to be friends with dictators, which I think is even worse. He's
taking serious issues seriously, such
he's taking
as COVID.
He's got exactly, and just sort of at the bottom of everything, he seems like a sane, fundamentally decent person who actually cares about trying to do a good job and make the world a better place. And I may be frustrated with him from time to time at his pace or at his priorities, but I'm never going to like go to bed at night terrified about what's going to happen because he's the president.
Yeah. Right.
That's
a good way of putting it. And I do think that the fundamentally decent person is something that we took for granted was going to be the case for so long that we are kind of not acknowledging that that's a very important thing after having 4 years of a fundamentally indecent person in office.
Yeah. Someone who made no secret, who made no attempt to hide the fact that he didn't care about anything but himself, that he was willing to throw even longtime friends and allies over the side if it suited him, or if they said one thing that displeased him,
I said, even before he was inaugurated, I said, have you ever been to a house that the looters have gone in and they've taken out all the wiring and the copper and anything of value, and they've ripped the copper wiring right out of the walls, and it's going to cost, 10 times as much to fix it now, to patch it up as it would have because of all the damage it's done, where everything of value has been stolen? I said, that's what this administration is going to be like, except instead of a single house, what's going to be looted is the entire country.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's pretty much what happened. And some people love him for it. And I just don't get it.
Some people love him for it. And as you said a couple minutes ago, some people don't see the difference between him and the current guy, which baffles me. I mean, I completely get, if you are especially if you are politically, if you are like a far leftist and you believe in much more revolutionary change being necessary. Like, I completely understand why you would be unsatisfied with Joe Biden. I completely get it.
You
I'm,
can be dissatisfied and
but
still acknowledge that he's at least
yeah,
in. Even if you don't think he's helping enough, he's not actively making things worse.
no, I mean, yeah. Like, I don't get how, and I don't get what you're trying to accomplish if you're saying that. If because basically what that translates to is no level of change short of everything I want is going to be good enough for me.
Right, and that's what I was
You
saying
know?
before. You
Yeah.
have to be happy with progress because you have a goal that you're never going to firmly reach. You're never going to reach a point where you're
Yeah.
going to say everyone is equal, everything is fine, we're good now, I can stop. That's
Right.
never going to
That's never going
happen.
to be the case. Yeah.
So you need to take solace and take joy in moving toward that goal because that's as much as you're ever going to get. And
Right.
maybe you want to move toward it more than you have. And I understand that and I respect that. And I probably will agree with you on just about all of it. But you still have to be more than miserable that things are not actively getting worse anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I do not understand this concept that Biden is worthless and is no different than Trump. I do not understand where that comes from unless you're just, again, dedicated to being miserable, or you're just a fatalist who doesn't truly believe that anything will change.
Yeah. I think that's part of it. I think some of it is that. I think some of it is fatalism, that people who, and many of whom probably come by it honestly, like maybe they've been let down so many times, they've been frustrated so many times by the lack of real progress, or by the rolling back of progress. And I get that, and you just sort of throw your hands up and you say, to hell with it, nothing's ever going to get better. Nothing short of a revolution that completely sweeps the table clean is going to be good enough. And I mean, emotionally, I get how you could be there, how you could get to that place. But practically speaking, I mean, yeah, that's just you're basically saying, I'm not going to do anything to actually help make things better. you know, but I'm gonna pat myself on the back for it, which is not a place that I would want to be, you know?
It's like an advanced version of the people who are proud not to vote because all the candidates are the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Well, thanks for
It's
thanks
like,
for
and
thanks for doing
most,
nothing to help.
not everyone who says that, but the majority of people who say that are the white men who already have everything that other people are still fighting for.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
have to worry about their identity, their existence being erased or anything like that. You don't have the people who are making those arguments are the people who aren't worried about losing their right to be married, or
Yeah.
their right to what they believe in, or their right to have their gender acknowledged.
Exactly.
And it's very
Exactly.
easy to say that it's not going to change. It doesn't matter if you're not somebody who's going to be paying the price. Somebody who it is going to matter for,
Yeah.
and who things will change depending on who's in office.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And
It's it's
with
it's it's a
trans people, I mean, you know, my sister and brother-in-law attend the synagogue in Pittsburgh where they had the shooting a couple years ago, and
mhm.
Jewish. Uh, have my wife's brother is gay, is married. They have trans people in the family.
Yeah.
These are people who are endangered by Trump and by Republicans in general in this country. And the difference, you say Trump versus Biden, that damn well does matter, and it does make
Yeah.
a difference.
Absolutely.
A lot of people with Biden in office don't have to worry that their identity is going to be erased by a legislative action because somebody's a bigot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that makes a difference. It doesn't make as big of a difference as it needs to or as it should, but it definitely makes a difference to have a president of the United States who is willing to go on TV and say, I support trans people's rights. Like, I think trans people deserve to have the same rights as other people, and deserve to be treated with dignity and respect the same as any other human being.
Yeah, the
You
night that
know,
the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage, the White House put the rainbow lights up outside, that you know, shining in the, or it might not have been exactly that night, but it was shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Whereas when Trump got into some trouble, he actually turned all the outside lights off and hid inside, so hoping nobody would know he was in there.
Yeah. Oh no! Don't you remember? He was just inspecting the bunker. That was his excuse. I didn't go down in the bunker. I was just inspecting it. Sure. Sure you were. You were, and that's like when your grandfather would fall asleep and then he'd say he was just resting his eyes. Sure, okay. Yeah, that's fine. We all know. You don't have to lie. I don't know why you're even attempting to get away with this. Like, but anyway, so yeah. Shall we wrap this up? We've been going for almost 2 hours.
Yeah, we can skip the who's garbage now.
Yeah.
We know.
It's Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
That's who we were going to talk about.
That's got to be disillusioning,
It's very disillusioning.
Everything that he supposedly stood for and things that he made good arguments for and didn't put it into practice.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, it's one of those things that it's like a train that's been coming for a while, because like, I mean, I heard Charisma Carpenter's story years ago. Like, I knew that she had been mistreated on Angel. And I didn't know how widespread it was. I didn't know that it was such a common experience on his sets, which apparently it was. I thought maybe it was just a thing where the two of them didn't get along and he mistreated her because of that. But apparently it's like a regular thing with him, which is but the general idea, is something that has been out there for a while. And this is just sort of like with Weinstein. It's just, this, for whatever reason, this was the chickens come home to roost moment. And this was the moment. Yeah. This was what made it actually break through, and people started to take it seriously.
It's weird how that happens. Like Bill Cosby had all the stuff that was known about him for a while, but then the one comedian ended up calling him out on stage, and somehow it gained traction.
Yeah,
it's weird how those things happen sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
It's a shame it takes that long, because if these things would gain traction originally, when the stories first come out, when it first becomes known, there'd be a lot less damage in the following years until it finally gets addressed.
Yeah, and just like there's something like that going on right now with Woody Allen, because the Allen versus Farrow documentary series aired on HBO, which was excellent. I watched it as it came out, and
that stuff was known 20 years ago.
It was, yeah. There's really not a lot of new information in it, but it's presented in a way that pretty much makes it undeniable. Like, it's, you watch that documentary series and you come away from it thinking, okay, he did that shit. There's really no reasonable way that you can say he probably didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, he did. Yeah. But yeah, that was, I mean, it was the early 90s when that first came out. And it was a news story at the time, and a lot of people talked about it, but nothing really happened. And now here we are, 30 years later, talking about the exact same thing, but for some reason, it's being taken more seriously. And there are people saying
we're slowly advancing as a culture and slowly becoming a bit more understanding of these things, and a bit less tolerant of the bigotry. This whole cancel culture thing is basically, people are upset that there's consequences for actions that they used to be rewarded for.
Yeah, exactly.
It used to be enforce what's normal, enforce being common, enforce, don't be different, don't stand out. You can mock people who are different. And now you can't do that anymore. And the whole cancel culture thing is a complete lack of comprehension why the things that the bullying that people used to be rewarded for is the sort of thing that can be career threatening now.
Yeah. That's it exactly. And
you know what? That's progress. We're not where we need to be, but we're moving in the right direction.
That's it. What a nice note to end on.
I think so too.
What a nice note to end on. So yeah, maybe we can get back into a groove where we do this about once a month.
I would hope so.
I would like that.
I would like that.
Yeah.
Jess may show up and may not show up.
Actually, she messaged me and said that I guess she just forgot after she after she said she wanted to be on. She messaged me and she said they were in line at the grocery store, and I was like, okay, that's fine. I mean, it's completely fine.
Yeah,
like it's
people have their lives to lead.
But it's it's funny that she's like, oh, I want to be on the show, and then she's like, oh shit, never mind. So maybe next time, Jess. Jess, you're welcome anytime. And if we do this next month,
we'll
and
see.
yeah,
And hey, maybe Jason will drop a line and be interested in showing up too.
yeah, he can talk. He can shit talk America like he's always doing.
Oh, the grief we give him for that. I don't
He's a
even know
great
how
guy.
that all got started.
One,
I
one
really
of the
don't.
one of the approximately 7 dozen Jasons that I know in my
Yes.
life. It's not the same Jason. People who are watching her like, what, Jason like from the Let Me Listen podcast? Nope, completely different Jason.
Yeah.
Completely different Jason.
Whose last name we have not mentioned on air just because we haven't cleared that with him and
Yeah.
don't know what his position on that is.
It's Jason Snyder. It's not. It's not.
It's not. But hopefully we'll get back into a groove on this.
Yeah.
And for those who are watching, to our 3 dedicated viewers who have been waiting patiently for us to get back on the horse here, we thank you very much. And we're glad to be back, and we're glad that you're here.
Absolutely. And whenever next time is, we'll see you next time.
Yep. Hopefully in April or early May.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. See you next time, everybody. Have a good one.
Aloha.